We grow up in a world that glorifies being available to everyone all the time. From the time we are kids, we are told that a good person is someone who never says no, that loving someone means always being there, even when it hurts us. We are taught that refusing a request or putting ourselves first is selfish, that good people sacrifice endlessly without hesitation. But what happens when someone stops doing that? What happens when someone starts setting clear boundaries? When they stop participating in endless family drama? When they refuse to take on the emotions of everyone around them? When they decide to protect their energy instead of giving it away freely? Almost instantly, society gives them a new label. They are called cold, distant, selfish. But is that really what's happening? Or is it possible that what we are actually seeing is someone finally taking care of their mental health? Something that others misinterpret as being cruel or uncaring. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the most important figures in depth psychology, noticed this exact thing. He believed that in order to truly grow, a person has to go through a process he called individuation, the process of becoming your own person, separate from the crowd, separate from the collective expectations placed on you. That means learning how to protect your emotional integrity, even in close relationships. But here's the problem. This growth threatens the invisible system we live in, a system built on emotional dependence, on unspoken rules, on everyone quietly agreeing to carry each other's emotions. When someone starts drawing lines and respecting their own limits, they are breaking this unspoken contract. They are no longer available 24/7 to fix other people's lives. They are no longer saying yes to every demand. This doesn't mean they've suddenly become cold. It just means they no longer tolerate situations that drain them. A lot of what we call kindness might not actually be kindness at all. Sometimes it's fear. Fear of being rejected. Fear of not being loved. Many people confuse being good with never saying no. But often, that constant yes comes from a compulsion to please others at any cost. And when this pattern is broken, when you stop overgiving, it forces everyone around you to face a hard truth. They were not dealing with the real you. They were dealing with a version of you that was shaped to meet their needs. And that's why people react so strongly when someone starts setting boundaries. It's not because that person is doing harm. It's because they are suddenly being clear. They are no longer saying yes to everything. They are choosing themselves. And that choice holds up a mirror to others. It forces them to see their own immaturity, their own inability to handle frustration, their own hidden dependence on someone else's energy. This is what we are going to explore deeply. We are going to look at why healthy boundaries are mistaken for coldness, why so many people resist when someone close to them starts to become emotionally independent, and why Jung believed this process of individuation, even though it can feel lonely and even painful, is one of the highest forms of self. Jung taught that growing up, in the true psychological sense, will always cost you some level of acceptance. Some people will not like the new you, but in losing their approval, you gain something far more valuable, your own freedom. Even today, even with all the progress society has made, we are still deeply conditioned to put others before ourselves. We are still taught that our value comes from how much we can tolerate, how much we can endure without complaining, how much we can give before we collapse. We are praised when we overwork ourselves, when we are always available, when we sacrifice without question. So, when you begin setting boundaries, you aren't just saying no to individuals, you are breaking a cultural pattern. You are rebelling against an idea that says you must be constantly open, constantly giving, constantly ready to meet someone else's needs, whether those needs are emotional, mental, or practical. And this is where things get tricky. The more you give, the more you are celebrated. But the moment you say, I need to protect my energy, or I can't do this right now, you instantly become suspicious in the eyes of others. Suddenly you are not the same person. You are called cold. People may even say you are selfish. Jung explained that this reaction comes from emotional fusion, when two people's emotions are so tangled that they no longer know where one ends and the other begins. In this state, when one person pulls back to protect themselves, the other feels abandoned. They don't see it as you setting a healthy limit. They see it as rejection. In dynamics like this, the other person doesn't see you as an independent individual. You are seen as an extension of them. That's why boundaries feel so threatening, because they break that illusion. They expose the fact that what was being called love was actually a form of emotional enmeshment. And this isn't just a personal issue, it's cultural. Think about the messages we grow up with. Movies, books, music, they all glorify self-sacrifice. The perfect friend is the one who answers every call, even if it's 3 a.m. The perfect parent is the one who never gets tired, never says no. The perfect partner is the one who tolerates everything and never complains. Within that fantasy, a boundary feels like an attack. It feels like rejection. But Jung offered a completely different perspective. He said real love isn't about losing yourself. It's about two whole individuals choosing to be together without either of them disappearing in the process. And that can only happen when you dare to step away from what society expects and start asking yourself honest questions. Am I doing this out of love or out of fear? Am I being caring, or am I just trying to avoid rejection? Am I truly helping, or am I erasing myself to be accepted? These questions change everything. Once you start saying no, you begin to see which of your relationships are truly built on mutual respect and which are built on convenience. You begin to see who liked you because of who you really are and who liked you because you were easy to use. And that's when things often get messy. When you stop jumping into every family drama, when you stop responding immediately to messages that drain you, when you start choosing your own peace over someone else's chaos, people get angry. They may even feel betrayed. But the real betrayal is not towards them. The real betrayal would be betraying yourself by continuing to live in self-denial just to keep others comfortable. This is the moment where everything becomes clearer. You begin to see who was truly benefiting from your lack of boundaries. You see who counted on you to be the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who would carry all the weight. And that realization can be both painful and liberating. Because the first wave of shock doesn't come from you. It comes from everyone else. The moment you start to choose yourself, masks start falling. People who once celebrated your kindness now say you have changed. People who loved your generosity start calling you selfish. But the truth is, many of them were unconsciously depending on your willingness to never say no. Jung noticed that part of individuation means breaking free from the roles we were assigned by the collective. And one of the most common roles is the role of the helper, the one who is always available, always listening, always supporting. It sounds noble, but many times it isn't a conscious choice. It's a survival strategy. It's how many of us learn to feel safe. But this strategy can become a prison. When you step out of that role, you force others to finally face themselves. The friend who always vented to you now has to sit with their own thoughts. The family member who leaned on you to solve their problems now has to take responsibility. The partner who relied on your endless patience now has to grow. And that's why it feels so uncomfortable. Because what you're really doing is taking back what was never yours. You are handing back the emotions, the responsibilities, the problems that were projected onto you. This can feel like abandonment to others, but it is actually a step towards true health. That is why so many people will accuse you of being cold. It is easier to say you've become heartless than to face their own immaturity or dependence. As long as they can call you cold, they don't have to change, they don't have to grow. And yes, this is when some relationships start falling apart. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped playing a role that was never truly yours. And in that painful breaking apart, you finally begin to see the difference between relationships built on respect and those built on control disguised as care. But then comes the biggest question. How do you know if you are actually maturing, or if you are just shutting down out of fear? How do you know if you are setting boundaries from a healthy place, or if you are just closing off your heart? This is where we have to understand the difference between emotional maturity and emotional coldness. The two can look very similar from the outside, but they are completely different on the inside. Emotional coldness doesn't want connection. It runs from intimacy, refuses to be vulnerable, avoids love because love feels dangerous. That kind of distance is not a form of self-care. It is a wall built from old wounds and unprocessed pain. Coldness looks like shutting off feeling. It's the hard closing of the heart, so nothing can hurt it. A cold person doesn't set limits because they honor themselves. They build high walls because they are scared of being truly seen. Emotional maturity is the opposite. A mature person does not avoid connection. They choose it. They don't run from closeness. They make relationships based on respect and responsibility. They won't give their whole inner life to just anyone. Their limits are not crude barriers. They are doors with locks. Only people who show real care, who listen and who give back, get the key. Jung saw this as central to becoming a full person. He called it differentiation, learning to be with someone without dissolving into them, It means leaving behind the childish idea that love must mean carrying everyone's pain and moving toward relationships where each person holds their own inner life. This kind of maturity is often mistaken for coldness, because it refuses to fall into other people's emotional storms. The mature person watches, understands, and supports, but does not drown in another person's chaos. They know how to be present without losing themselves. They can listen without turning into an emotional trash bin. They hold their energy steady, so when they do give it, it is a conscious choice, not a reflexive habit. That kind of clarity makes people who live by need and fusion uncomfortable. For those people, true care looks like abandonment, because they have been raised to believe that being needed equals being loved. Saying no to draining demands is not cruelty. It is clarity. Setting limits in the face of constant emotional pressure is not selfishness. It is smart responsibility. Emotional maturity doesn't cancel out affection. It makes affection clearer. It becomes a filter. Shaky ties based on projection, control, or convenience tend to dissolve in front of someone who stands firm. Real connections based on mutual respect and growth actually thrive. When you stop acting like the family peacemaker or the friend who always takes the blame, you stop feeding patterns that require you to disappear. Once you stop, unhealthy ties fall away and honest relationships can grow. But that change brings consequences. Clear limits act like a catalyst. They speed up processes that were quietly happening in a relationship. When you start to say no, when you stop being available on demand, the relationships that depended on imbalance begin to collapse. Jung saw this collapse as part of becoming a separate person. When you stop being someone else's psychic extension, you stop feeding the unconscious images they projected onto you. A friend who always relied on your listening must now face their own solitude. A family member who asked you to fix their problems has to learn to solve them. A partner who counted on your tolerance now either grows or the relationship ends. For many, that confrontation with their own lack is too much. Relationships that were emotionally immature cannot survive boundaries because they were built on unspoken rules, roles, and unequal give and take. One always gives, the other always takes. One listens while the other vents. One carries while the other avoids. When you interrupt that cycle by holding your limits, the pattern breaks and the relationship often falls apart. This is hard to accept because even toxic bonds give a strange kind of comfort, regularity, belonging, a false sense of being accepted. Giving all the time is familiar, and familiar often feels safer than unknown. That fear of the unknown brings thoughts that pull you back. What if I end up alone? What if nobody else accepts me like this? What if I'm being too harsh? Those are normal questions. They show you are moving from emotional fusion into autonomy. They are signs that you are stepping into a new stage of inner life. This work of individuation is not about making enemies of others, it's about becoming yourself. It means choosing who you let in and how you let them in. It means learning to care without being consumed. Not all relationships that end when you set healthy limits were real bonds. Many were unconscious agreements between a victim and a rescuer, dependency and control, or convenience and habit. Jung would say that cutting these ties frees you. It also offers the other person a chance to grow, but only if they are ready. If they are not, they will walk away, and that is something you must accept. The pain that follows is not always grief for the person. Often it is the breaking of an identity that was built around that person's approval. It hurts to see that you were loved for what you did, not for who you are. That realization can be both shattering and freeing. Individuation is a crossing point. Once you start saying no to what takes you away from yourself, you start saying yes to who you are. For Jung, this is when the ego, the part of you that acts and chooses, begins a real conversation with the self, the deeper center that holds your values and truth. That conversation can't happen in the noise of other people's expectations. It needs silence, distance, and sometimes solitude. It happens when you stop doing what people expect and start asking, what is true for me? This is the psychic separation I've been talking about. It is not about cutting off others. It is about refusing to play a part that was written for you. When that separation begins, you stop being the automatic peacemaker, the friend who never complains, the partner who swallows everything for the sake of calm. You become someone who decides with intention. You choose who to meet, how to meet them, and how much of yourself you will give. That is psychological freedom. It allows you to form relationships that are honest. It allows connection between two whole people. each aware of their borders and each choosing to be present. Jung believed the self isn't some perfect end state. It is the center that shows up when you become whole, when you accept both your light and your shadow. Setting boundaries is one of the first signs of that wholeness. A boundary is not a wall. It is an affirmation. I know myself. I respect myself. I expect the same from those who want to be with me. People who go through this change report a deep relief. They stop playing roles and start living. They stop bargaining their essence for approval. In the space that opens, parasitic relationships have no place. Authentic bonds have room to breathe and grow. Still, this path is not easy. Many arrive exhausted, confused, or guilty. They worry about how to say no without sounding defensive. They wonder how to express their limits without starting more conflict. They want to protect their energy and also keep the dignity of their ties. How do you share a new stance without creating more hurt? How do you set limits with firmness and with care? The way you communicate matters. Clear, calm, honest statements are better than long defenses. Small acts that match your words matter more than big explanations. Saying no once and then keeping it teaches people where your line is. Consistency builds respect. Boundaries are also a form of respect for the other person. When you say, I can't be available all the time, you are not rejecting the other. You are making room for real empathy. Unlimited empathy turns into self-destruction. If you always absorb other people's pain, you end up leaving yourself empty. Protecting your limits is fair both to you and to those you care about, because it prevents resentment and burnout. Empathy that has no boundary becomes a disguise for codependence. A relationship that survives clear limits is likely stronger and truer. This stance, clear, kind, consistent, is not coldness, it is courage. It takes courage to let go of a familiar role, even when it gives you status or belonging. It takes courage to be alone rather than staying in a tie that drains or corrupts. It takes courage to form relationships based on awareness, not on lack. There will be losses, distance, silence, criticism, but there will also be quiet, space, and an honest self. You won't be acting anymore. You will be present. For Jung, this is the work of individuation. It is the slow, often lonely work of coming back to yourself. It requires confronting the masks you wear to be accepted and questioning the roles given to you before you could choose. It is hardest because it asks you to take responsibility for your life, including parts you have blamed on others for years. That responsibility begins with small acts: choosing rest, saying no to extra demands, refusing to be the default listener for someone who never listens back, stopping the habit of smoothing over problems to avoid a fight. Each small boundary is an invitation to the self. When you begin to choose your limits, you create space for new questions. Who am I when I stop performing for others? What do I want without the pressure of someone else's needs? When you live with that kind of integrity, relationships change. Some will fall away, some will grow. That is the inevitable cost of becoming yourself. You are not becoming harder, you are becoming clearer. Practical communication helps. Use short, truthful lines. Use I statements. I can't take that on right now, or I don't have the emotional energy today to handle this. Avoid long defenses that make the boundary about the other person's fault. State the limit simply and hold it. Follow action 2 words. If you say you won't take late-night calls about their problems, then don't answer late-night calls. If you say you won't fix their mess, don't fix it. These acts teach people how to treat you. They also protect your inner space so you can be the person you want to be. It's also important to notice the difference between a boundary meant to protect and one meant to punish. A mature boundary is a steady, honest line. A punitive boundary is meant to hurt or control the other. If your limit is about self-protection and growth, it will usually be calm and consistent. If it's about revenge, it will be erratic and sharp. Watch your motives. Ask yourself, am I doing this to grow or to push someone away because I feel hurt? The answer will guide how you act. Boundaries are a test. They reveal who is willing to meet you in reality and who prefers the old illusion. They show who will grow with you and who will leave if they must. They expose the difference between a relationship built on mutual care and a relationship built on one person sacrificing for the other. That exposure can be painful. It can feel like loss, but it's also a liberation. You get to stop pretending you are someone you are not. When you protect your limits, you give the other person a chance, the chance to grow or to leave. This is a kindness, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. If someone cannot respond to your clarity by respecting it, then they are not ready for a relationship based on equality. Letting them go is not cruelty, it is honesty. You will grieve. That grief is real, but it is grief for a role that kept you small, not for the person you are becoming. The work of individuation includes embracing both your gifts and your flaws. It is not a path to perfection, it is a path to wholeness. As you practice limits, you will meet parts of yourself you avoided. You will meet shame, you will meet loneliness, you will meet freedom, and with time, you will see that the relationships that remain are stronger. They can carry disagreement, they can handle distance, they can survive boundaries because they are built on truth. Saying no is one of the clearest ways to say yes. Yes to your health, yes to your clarity, yes to the truth of who you are. In a world where guilt and manipulation often drive ties, setting boundaries can feel like rejection. The deeper truth is that boundaries are bridges. They don't push people away so much as show which connections can live in daylight. When you say, "I can't be available 24/7", you are not saying the other person doesn't matter. You are saying you matter too. When you refuse to carry pain that is not yours, you are not being indifferent. You are preventing compassion from turning into self-harm. Jung taught that only what is differentiated can truly unite. There is intimacy only when two whole people meet, each with clear edges, each able to speak from truth, not from unconscious need. When you hold limits, you are telling the world, "I know where I end and you begin." You are also saying, "I respect you enough not to become what you need to be saved." That is not coldness, it is bravery. It is the bravery to leave the old version of yourself that fit other people's expectations. It is the bravery to be alone if necessary, rather than stay in ties that make you smaller. There will be costs. You will lose some people. You will hear criticism. You may face silence, but you will also gain space. You will find peace. Most importantly, you will find yourself. Not a role you play for approval, but a person who chooses how to be in the world. That is individuation. That is emotional maturity. That is the true freedom Jung pointed toward. If this topic connects with you, have you ever been called cold for starting to respect yourself? Have you felt the pain of relationships falling away once you stopped nullifying your needs? Sharing your story helps others who are on the same path. If you want, leave your experience in the comments. If this video helped you see your relationships more clearly, consider subscribing. There are deeper lessons on how to communicate boundaries with care, how to balance firmness and empathy, and how to keep dignity in strained ties. Those are the next things to explore if you want to go further.